even if you want to start your own thing, it is scary. You do have to take a lot of risks, especially for people who are looking to get into the technology. It's not too early, even if everyone hasn't caught on yet. If you get in it now, you're going to be setting yourself up to be ahead of the curve, which is always great.
Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome to episode 48 of the Andrew Deitch podcast. If you're listening to this today, happy Monday. It's a little chilly here today in Atlanta. If you're listening to this in the future, happy whatever day. I don't know. But thanks for being here. I appreciate it. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. Thanks for checking it out. My podcast is all about having meaningful and cool conversations with the most fascinating people I know. And today I have a very special guest, Annie Eaton. And Annie is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Futurus. They're a future technology company that focuses on virtual and augmented reality development. And she also serves on TAG's digital media board. And she runs a 900-member VR interest group here in Atlanta. So a few weeks ago, I met up with Annie at their office on a Tuesday morning. But before the podcast, I was actually able to try their totally immersive virtual reality experience. And prior to this, I had tried some, kind of dinky virtual reality before, like on a smartphone, the Oculus 360, I think that's what it's called, the Oculus VR for Samsung phones. And my biggest complaint with these experiences that I had tried before was I was not able to move around the space or interact with things. I couldn't see or use my hands, and you can basically just look around. Not really much else. It's kind of annoying because not being able to use your body removes you from the experience of total immersion. And another big complaint that people have is the cords. In order to run a high-end VR system, you need a really high-powered gaming PC to run the thing. So that means that if you are walking around in this virtual space, you're going to be tethered to the computer with wires, and you might get tangled up or accidentally unplug something. But if you're actually wearing the computer on your back, the wires don't get in the way at all. And so, of course, at Futurus, they have a gaming PC that you wear on your back. So I put on this MSI VR1 gaming PC backpack. Yes, the backpack is a computer. And I strapped the HTC Vive VR headset to my face. And then they gave me the HTC Vive hand controllers so I could interact with objects in the virtual world using my hands. And all of my previous complaints melted away. I could move around the space freely. I could see and use my hands in real time. I could bend down and pick things up. I had no wires tethering me to anything. And I was in a whole other world. I didn't, after a few minutes, I was totally comfortable using the controllers. And I'm dead serious. Like, it was an experience I will never forget. Like, I was just like, oh, okay, this is how it's supposed to be. I get it. This is insane. I literally feel like I'm hanging out with Rick and Morty or shooting virtual ducks. Like, it was insane. And for the past 2 weeks, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. To be honest, it was borderline life-changing because it was the first time I was actually able to experience VR at such a high level. But after all that was done, I reluctantly took off the headset and PC backpack, and Annie and I had an awesome conversation. We discussed the future of VR, its potential applications in the business and consumer world, and all kinds of other fun stuff. Stick around, you'll hear about it. And since I love gadgets and technology, I had a great time talking to Annie about all this. So without any further ado, please welcome Annie Eaton. There it is. We're live.
Yay, hello.
Awesome. So I'm here with Annie Eaton. Very nice.
Gonna turn my buzzer off so that doesn't happen again.
That's actually a good idea. I'm gonna turn mine off. Actually.
Yeah, because it will buzz. the entire time.
No worries. Well, so Annie, give me, I guess just like an elevator pitch of yourself.
Okay. Well, I'll do kind of a combination elevator pitch of myself and the company, if that's okay.
Yes, of course.
I am the company.
Yes.
So again, my name is Annie Eaton. I am the CEO and co-founder of Futurus. We're a virtual and augmented reality development company based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And I have a background in marketing and communications. I actually went to Georgia Tech, but got a liberal arts degree, which, yes, they have those there. Got out around 2010 and worked in the power and financial technology industries for a few years before branching off and starting my own company. So I met my co-founder, Peter, at a previous company, and we were really both interested in the virtual reality technology. This was about 2013, 2014, and he brought in some early hardware from Oculus, the Oculus DK1, and I got to see it and really got inspired and excited about it, and we really wanted to do something more practical, non-gaming applications, mostly because of my marketing background, and he was doing training animations, and so we tried doing it, and it didn't work, unfortunately, with the company we were working at, but we found opportunities that we could branch out and form our own business. So we did that in 2014 and have been growing ever since.
That's awesome. So before you got into VR and all that, had you ever tried it or like done
I actually
anything?
had not.
And it was like 2014, so it was before like all this craziness.
Yes. He was the person who had brought it in. Another person who's a friend now, my friend Drew, who also does some VR development. I had seen it from him through another agency we were working with. So it's kind of like all these things happened at once. And then I got an opportunity to actually interview at Oculus through the Georgia Tech Alumni Career Fair. And that was a cool opportunity. So there were multiple things at one time kind of hitting at me about virtual reality, which got my attention and got me to take it seriously. But prior to that, I had not tried virtual reality.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I just tried it. So for people who are listening, I got to just try their virtual reality experience. It was very interesting, to say the least. I'd never done an experience where I had like the trackers in my hand. I'd only done like looking around kind of stuff. So that was like super, super fascinating.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that people don't realize is the spectrum that virtual reality is on. So what you may have tried in the past was Google Cardboard or maybe Samsung Gear VR or Google Daydream, where those are all based off of a mobile phone. And then what you tried today was the HTC Vive with the MSI VR1 backpack computer, and that really gives you a tetherless experience, but with the highest powered virtual reality you can buy, or at least consumers can buy. And with that, there's positional tracking. So that's actually tracking your movement on the Z-plane, whereas on a mobile device, there's nothing from the outside to tell your headset where you are positionally. So that's why you're actually able to walk around in that device and interact with the world in an elevated level than mobile VR.
Yeah, because that was just a whole nother level. The first time I saw anyone with like the backpack thing, I was just like, this is so next level. I love this. Like, yeah. And so getting to try it for the first time was like really, really cool. Yeah. But so your company is really focused on like the marketing kind of side of VR and how you can work together with brands, right? And using virtual reality and augmented reality to do all kinds of interesting and futuristic stuff. Exactly. Is that where the name comes from? Futuristic?
Yes.
Futurus?
Yes. So when we originally founded the company, we were called ATL VR. And we only did virtual reality development and consulting. And then we started taking on other technologies and offering other services throughout the last few years, including 360 video production and augmented reality, both mobile, like smartphone based, as well as head-mounted display like smart glasses or mixed reality devices like the HoloLens by Microsoft. And because of that, we realized that ATL VR didn't fit anymore. not all of our clients were based in Atlanta. We were hopefully looking ourselves to expand into other areas and regions of the world. And so we decided it was time to rebrand. And at that point, which was a little over a year ago now, maybe a year and a half ago, we decided to start that process. And it was a long, arduous process that I would not go through again anytime soon. But I really think we made the right choice, and we settled on the name Futurus because we wanted to really have a brand that represented our forward-thinking and futuristic work.
Yeah. That's great. And you have a good domain name. You've got the .us.
We got the .us, yes. So you don't even have to type in a .com or anything. It's just Futurus with the dot in the US.
There we go.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming that most of the people listening to this have a general idea of virtual reality, like what it is. Obviously, if you're listening to this and you're totally clueless, I would just say go Google it, because we're not going to waste time like explaining exactly like, oh, you put on this headset, blah, blah, blah. But for people that they know the Oculus Rift, or they've tried the Samsung Galaxy VR, or Google Cardboard or something like that, how far off do you think it is until everyone is going to have some sort of really intense virtual reality experience in their house, or they're going to own one, or their friend will have one? Because right now, like, I don't know anyone that has anything like crazy.
Right, and that's, I guess, a hurdle that everyone's going to have to jump through at some point. And we're already seeing people who aren't directly involved professionally starting to buy the devices for their homes. I know that on the Gear VR side, which is mobile, there are millions in circulation now, partially due to the fact that Samsung gave them away with new phones. But you know what? Every little bit helps. And
Samsung's good at that.
They are great at that. Yes, and I'm so glad that they were able to provide that to people, because it introduced a great deal of people who had no idea what was coming to the technology early on. But I think that it's kind of going to come to be a merge of augmented and virtual reality before it's something that every person has, just like today's smartphones. And a lot of people are kind of looking at both technologies and seeing them as competing with each other. But at our company, we look at them as helping each other grow. Because like last year and the year before, or early last year and then the full year before, it was all about virtual reality in the media, and just really heavy push and investment and things like that towards virtual reality. And then after the release of Pokemon Go last year, the coin kind of flipped, and then everyone was drawing their attention to augmented reality. And then a lot of the companies who were focused more on that started having more success, and we certainly got more business around augmented reality after that happened. So thank you, Pokemon Go. But what a lot of people don't realize is that the two technologies are kind of playing off of each other, and when one has a success, the other ends up growing from it. And ultimately, we see this as merging and kind of becoming one device. So my hope is that in the future, we'll all have a pair of smart glasses that has the ability to become opaque and give you a virtual reality experience, but then can also be translucent and give you that digital overlay onto your real environment. I think we're a ways away from that, but I'd say for people, maybe the majority of people, to have virtual and augmented reality in their home, especially on the virtual reality side, 5 to 7 years. For the merge of the two to where it is integrated in our everyday lives in every component and every aspect, I'd say probably 10 years. But there are devices like Magic Leap, for example, is a device that we don't have too much information about still, even though they've hinted that they're sending out some devices about 6 months
Isn't
from
that
now.
the one that's like holographic or something?
Yes.
They had like a little elephant demo or something.
Yes,
I saw that.
That's the demo you're thinking of. And they've gone through some ups and downs themselves with PR and just making sure that they're actually conveying what their technology does in their marketing packages. So that's kind of a fine line to walk, especially when you have a product that hasn't been released yet. But with what they're doing and the amount of investment they've gotten from huge companies like Google and Alibaba, I feel like a technology like what they're promising, which is a device that truly is smart and reacts with your environment and is hopefully a small-ish wearable is something that will come sooner rather than later. And luckily, which we've been seeing on the virtual reality side, devices have been getting lighter and more comfortable. I think that trend will continue to evolve until it's something that everyone will want to wear.
Yeah, it's interesting because there were certain aspects of when I was in the experience, like when I was picking something up, like it felt weightless at first, but then after I was doing the shooting game for so long, my arms are almost getting tired from like holding up my hands. But then I was kind of thinking like, well, when you're actually shooting a shotgun, like it's heavy anyways. So like it makes a lot of sense that my hands would be kind of hurting if this was like a realistic experience.
Yeah, I had a similar experience when the HTC Vive first came out. There's a experience called The Lab that was put out by the Valve team, and it had little mini experiences within it so that you could really try all that the Vive has to offer. And one of them was archery, and I could go through the simulation once, but like on a second time, my arms hurt so bad. And I'm like, I'm pretty weak, or VR really is a good exercise tool, maybe both. But yeah, it does throw you off with the gravity and actual weight of things, but once you've been doing it for a little while, you kind of forget about that.
Yeah, it's kind of like how in the beginning everyone's like, oh, we're going to use the Wii and everyone's going to get really fit because they're going to be playing Wii Sports all the time. And then in reality, everyone's just sitting on the couch playing Call of Duty or whatever on the Wii.
Or learn ways to like fake the Wii. So you're sitting and you just flick your wrist to play tennis. And
exactly.
It's like, well, maybe that wasn't the initial goal, but some people kind of like to turn it into something easier or change what's supposed to happen. So I'm sure that'll happen with VR as well. But I think the coolest thing about the system you tried with the positional tracking is that you really can walk around and it's all around you at all times.
That was the craziest thing, was that you could walk around and it was positionally like moving me around the virtual space, because like that was the biggest complaint with any other things I've tried, is like you can look around but you can't go anywhere, you can't pick up anything, you can't touch anything.
Yeah.
And with the trackers in my hand, like after a while it felt really natural. Like I was just doing stuff and forgetting about that there was this weird like contraption in my hand.
Exactly. And I think you were playing the Duck Hunt game. So when I played that one, that's a newer game. When it came out, it was like a week or two ago that I played it for the first time. And because it takes place, or at least the base program takes place in the evening, it's kind of like dim or dark outside. So when I came out of it, I totally forgot, and I was only in there probably 10 or 15 minutes. I totally forgot it was daytime. I don't know if you had that same reaction as well, but you come out and you're like, what year is it?
Yeah, exactly. Who's the president?
Oh gosh. Sometimes you just get lost. You can lose track of time in there. I have had that happen to me, and I'm sure others can agree.
Totally. There's this like fear I think that people have as well, that we're gonna just like start living in virtual reality. And I'm sure this has been brought up to you a million times, because everyone has seen Avatar or The Matrix, where you're all plugged in with your brain, and then your brain is just doing stuff while your body is just like, you know, sitting, doing nothing and atrophying or whatever. Obviously that's not what's happening right now, but do you think that there's people that will just straight up want to live in a virtual world all the time? Like, because there's definitely people that, like, after they saw Avatar, they got, like, depressed because they were like, I want to live in Pandora. Like, do you think there's people that would just be like, there's already people that are addicted to video games and stuff, and they basically live in this virtual world, but once it's so immersive and you're actually, like, in it?
Yeah, well, there are two sides to this. So I do think that some people will go that far in the future. It may or may not happen in our lifetimes. It probably will happen at some point in our lifetimes, but not to the point where your brain is fully hooked in. At least I don't think so.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people who may have social anxiety or, as you said, depression when they see these worlds and they want to interact. And that's just how they want to experience life. So if it's how someone chooses to experience their life, I really can't judge them there, because it's not the same as mine. But a lot of people who use online social platforms, I'm not talking social media, but I'm talking like Second Life and things like that, where they feel like they can be their true selves there. They're not represented by a gender or their appearance, things like that, I feel like those online worlds can actually give them a better quality of life because they'll have better social interactions than maybe in real life. And if that's how they get their happiness, then I am happy for them. So there is the point where you can take it overboard and maybe your body physically withers away. And I feel like that's bad because if your body's not healthy, your brain's not going to be healthy. But have you read the book Ready Player One?
I haven't.
Isn't
there a movie coming out soon?
There is, but read the book first.
I've heard I need to read the book.
Read the book, especially if you're interested in this, because the book is a really interesting take on a world that happens. And so most people live in the virtual world. It's called the Oasis, and the Oasis is like the virtual reality version of Earth. And there are jobs there. You can exchange goods. You can get outfit. Like you can, dress up. Everything that you could do in real life, aside from some of the physical things you can do there. But there are so many different components of haptic feedback, which is where you're getting something in the real world, either from a device or something like that, in the virtual environment that you feel like it's real. So that could be a treadmill that makes you feel like you're walking, or a blast of cold air to feel like you're in a wintry wonderland, or things like that. Even like a vest, we have one that vibrates when something hits you to make you feel the impact, things like that. So you still can have the exercise, you still can have the physical aspects of real world. It's just not actually the real world, but as population increases and we're taking over green space with city sprawl and things like that. I mean, I hope that there are still forests and parks and things like that, but I mean, the way things are growing, you never know. It's possible that might replace the real world as we know it today.
Yeah, because like Elon Musk is like talked about like how he thinks we're living in he's like, it's pretty probable that we're living in a simulation or whatever. And I mean, it's fun to kind of like toy around with that idea. Like, whoa, what if we all are in virtual reality already? Or like something like that. But I mean,
when I think about that too hard, it makes my brain hurt.
It is pretty crazy. Like, how could you tell if we were living in a simulation?
Right. Well, I don't think we would know.
Yeah, we wouldn't.
We would not know. And so if we're in a new simulation inside of the simulation, that just gets really meta. But you never know.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. So you work a ton with brands, like that's like what you guys do, and you're on the kind of marketing side, and then you also have like developers that are like creating these experiences and stuff like that. Yeah. So like when I think of that, I'm thinking of like you're creating an experience for like a trade show booth or something like that. What are some of the besides like that kind of stuff where people are like, whoa, virtual work's so cool. I mean, because obviously the wow factor is a big part of it, right. But what are some of the like things that maybe people wouldn't know about that you're doing with brands, stuff that you can talk about, of course?
Yeah, so without being too specific, one of the coolest things that we've been able to do is product visualization in places where either you can't bring the product or it maybe hasn't been built yet. That can also kind of translate over into real estate where you're doing pre-visualizations. Something that we've been working a lot with, and actually our first project ever back when we started the company did something similar, is taking CAD models and converting them into a virtual environment. And we've done it for quite a few projects, but that's a really good way to be able to show something to people that maybe you can't bring with you to an event.
Like a car or something like that, like a giant thing. Yeah,
something large or something that doesn't exist yet, or something that has to fit in with other components in a very, the large thing, that's probably the main reason we use it. Pre-visualization. So when we're doing that, we do have to do quite a bit to convert the CAD model into something that will work in virtual reality, because we are very cognizant of frame rate, and anything that would bog that down is bad for the user experience. So sometimes we'll completely strip it out. We had one project that even all the screws had individual threads that were bogging things down. So we had to take out the threads of the screws because you're never going to see that in this marketing application where you're really just trying to show people the product. They don't care about the threads and the screws. And if we can take things out like that to create a better and more smooth experience for the user, that's what we're going to do. So there is some conversion. It does take a little bit of time. I'm hopeful that as the technology progresses, there will be easier ways. So while we can export things out in an FBX file, which does work in Unity, which is what we use to develop the programming, it's just too big most of the time to be able to use. So that's a really good way to do it with marketing if you're showcasing a product. You can also really put people inside of your brand story. So we'll do that a lot with 360 video. We'll either go in and film their company culture, or maybe a day in the life of their team, or show their product from the very beginning all the way until it goes out to the consumer. Things like that, where we don't necessarily want to make a virtual recreation of it. We want to actually show the process. And we can do that with 360 videos. That's a really immersive way to do that. And then on the augmented reality side, it's bringing products to life. So you can actually scan packaging or different logos or things like that, and either learn more information about the product or gamify it and bring a fun experience to the consumer. So those are kind of the 3 different ways we utilize our technology on the marketing side. But we also work in other more enterprise-focused development, like training. Both virtual and augmented reality is really good for training as well. It's just putting people in situations before they actually have to encounter safety dangers or things like that. So we've gotten pretty good at coming up with more practical uses for the technology.
Yeah, the training aspect is really interesting to me, because I think it's a lot of stuff that people don't think about, because they're thinking of the entertainment side and the wow factor. But if you can actually put someone in, like you said, in like a dangerous situation or whatever, and then they almost feel like they've been there and experienced it already, so when the time comes, like, they're ready to go or whatever.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating. Also, another application that I've seen is like with augmented reality, like in the actual workplace, like for example, in like a manufacturing facility or something, there would be like, you'd be able to look around and like see little, I don't even know, like details about something you're looking at based on just it knowing, the headset knowing what you're looking at. Have you guys worked in any of that kind of stuff, or is that?
Yeah, we've done a little bit in that, and we've been working more recently with Microsoft and their latest MR product. So they had released the HoloLens prior, and now which is more of an AR experience. It's a digital overlay onto the real world.
And it has cameras on the outside, right?
Yeah. So it has depth mapping capabilities. So it can actually, when you put it on, like say in our office, it actually maps the walls so that we can place items on the walls and walk towards them and away from them, or place an object on the ground and you can walk around them. The field of view is still pretty small, especially when you compare it to virtual reality, where you've got your entire field of view there. But it is really great and promising technology that we hope will continue to evolve, and maybe the headsets will get a little lighter. Also on the smart glasses side, everyone like rolls their eyes when I bring this up, but Google Glass is back. They have released a new enterprise edition that is just called Glass now. It's very, very sophisticated. And the cool thing about that is that you can actually attach it to any glasses. So a lot of people, as you mentioned, more on the manufacturing side of things, are attaching it to their existing PPE and safety glasses. So it's compliant with their standards. And it is able to draw up information based on what you're looking at. Right now, for that type of device, we still utilize trackers. So it would actually scan either a barcode or a special design, or maybe even read what you're working with and be able to recall information based on that. With the HoloLens, we're moving, because it does have the depth mapping, we're moving towards it actually being able to recognize the equipment you're working with and be able to map to that equipment. And in the future, I think that will probably be the way things are, is we'll have each piece of equipment may have its own map, and that's pulled from the original CAD models or however we get it, and then we can drop in different information based on where you're looking. But right now we're still using trackers. So it's evolving very quickly, and we're definitely keeping up with the latest that we can work in. But there's a lot that we say it'll be that way because it doesn't necessarily exist or it hasn't been polished yet. But based on trends and the way things have been evolving, we really feel strongly about that.
Yeah, that kind of stuff reminds me of Iron Man, like how he's like building the thing, and then he needs to know, oh, is this or whatever, based on like what he's wearing.
Yeah, and that kind of brings us into input. So with the HoloLens, you can actually use hand gestures, and there are, I think, 2 right now. One is kind of like a blooming hand gesture, and one is a pinching. And that's pretty much to either open, close, or place things in your environment or make selections. And while those are really cool, you have to think that people make their hand gestures differently. Some people may be holding their hands in the wrong spot. It's not always going to work 100% of the time, but you also want to offer a hands-free solution. So it kind of complicates things when we're talking about hand gestures. What are the standards going to be down the road? While we have 2 right now, what are the different and new hand gestures that we'll recognize going to be? And then some devices allow an input. Well, pretty much most devices will allow a physical input, which will work 100% of the time because it's either giving the experience a yes or no input. So we'll always know because it's a physical, tactical feedback device like a Xbox controller, a keyboard and mouse, things like that. And then Microsoft or Windows has their new MR hand controllers, which have been said to work across multiple platforms, including all of their MR platforms, which now includes Acer, HP, Lenovo, several different devices. And it's nice that we'll have a consistent hand controller for all of those, no matter what the device.
That's good. Yeah, the hand controller adds like so much to it because once you can spatially see your hands in front of you, I did not get nauseous at all during the experience I just tried. And that was one thing that I've heard lots of people talk about because especially it is weird how just seeing your hands, like not even seeing your feet or anything, just the floating hands helps so much because you're like, okay, at least I kind of know where my body is. Yeah. I'm not just like floating in space or whatever.
Yeah, it gives you some grounding, and you were being tracked by infrared rays that were coming out of the little corner boxes. I don't know if you saw them out there.
I could see them like when I looked up too. You can actually see the little box.
They have the little boxes outlined in the program, so you know where they are, and that kind of helps define the play space. And that's why we like our clients to come over to our office. And this stuff is all portable too, but it really gives them the ability to try everything that we have to offer. Because when they try, we had this happen last week when they tried the Gear VR or the 360 video stuff. Like, it's really cool. But when you try that compared to all this interactive stuff, like even if the graphics aren't completely true to real life, or it doesn't completely look like real life, sometimes people don't care as much because they're getting a fully interactive experience. So we are really pushing into the interactive space and trying to get people to jump on interactive experiences because in our minds they're better.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I wanted to ask you, I know that obviously the new iPhone just came out and Apple just released their new like AR kit kind of stuff. And right now pretty much all like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like all virtual reality and stuff is created on Windows machines, right? Pretty much.
Majority of it, yes.
Just mainly because like Apple's machines have not been like designed for it. They're not powerful enough, blah, blah, blah. Do you think there's going to be this shift at all? Because I think people have the kind of idea that, oh, Apple is the creative company, all creators use a MacBook or like whatever. Do you think that there's going to be all these people that have been creating VR and AR for years now on Windows machines that would consider switching or anything?
I doubt they would switch just because I know many of them and we are very, very Windows focused. But even though we are Windows focused for creating, and I think one of the reasons for that is because we can customize our computers where you can't really do that with Apple's machines. because every developer that works here gets to, well, we buy the parts, but they give us a parts list and they get to build their own machine because it's truly custom for them. But I think because of the new release and the functionality with their AR kit, I think that a lot of people who have been using MacBooks and are excited to try this will jump on the AR wagon because Apple now integrates it into their existing apps. Even Apple apps that we create on our Windows machines. And then we have like a Mac Mini that we basically all we use it for is to upload apps to the App Store because we have to. So that's a little annoying to have to go through that extra step. But I still think, at least from our point of view and the majority of our colleagues in the industry, we're going to stick with our Windows machines. I get always made fun of because I have an iPhone, and my co-founder Peter always says, "You're going to switch someday." But now I'm like, well, I got to play with the Apple AR experiences. I was playing with the new Giphy World one last night, and that one's super fun. You can put little GIFs, and some of them are like famous, memes and things into your existing world. And we were at a burger place last night, and we put a virtual burger on the table, and we were all like pinching it and joking around with it. But it's cool because it's definitely a next step in two ways. One, adoption. We're touching tens of millions of people that may have not been familiar with augmented reality before, that now instantly have it integrated into a lot of the apps that they love and use every day. And a lot of new cool apps are coming out. And then two, we're getting the technology boost of being able to track things positionally from the inside out because of their sophisticated cameras. So the reason I am able to put a burger on my table and then be able to look around it with my phone as well as lean in closer and lean back is because the cameras are actually detecting the environment and mapping the objects to that environment, and it's all through the cameras. So it's not necessarily, because it does have some additional sensors. I know the new phones have additional sensors that'll help make that even
infrared
more,
blasters or something.
So that's even more precise, but we were doing it last night on an iPhone 7. So the cool thing is it is working on phones that did not that already existed. And then it'll work even better on the new phones. But I think that's what made me so excited, is because they're able to roll out something that doesn't just have to work on the newest technology. It can work on my iPhone 6S that I had last year and a half. So
yeah,
that's really cool.
You obviously have to give props to Apple because they're one of the few companies that can launch something and then it just becomes widely adopted by everybody. And so we're thankful to them for that, of course.
We are. No, I definitely have nothing against them. I really am grateful because it helps me. It makes my job easier.
Of course.
They rolled out a new product to integrate AR into their apps, and because of that, we're getting jobs from it. So it makes me happy. We like it, and some of the apps that are coming out are really cool and creative. And I'm grateful to them to be able to create such a widespread knowledge of new technology. Even though people think Apple invented augmented reality, I'm just gonna let them believe it because it helps us.
Yeah. although like people out there that are just like, Samsung's had this for years, blah, blah, blah. I tried this 10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, their AR kit, which was announced earlier this summer, we've been using as AR toolkit for years. So
yeah, exactly.
It's not something new, but people think it's new, so they get excited, and their excitement flows over into our revenue stream. So it's all good for all of us.
Can't complain.
Everybody wins.
Exactly. Like you were saying earlier, that's awesome. Another thing that I was thinking about earlier when I was like, okay, cool, what kind of stuff we're going to talk about? Obviously, gaming is like one of the biggest reasons why people would purchase like a virtual reality system for their home or whatever a lot of times, because it's awesome. But esports is becoming like so huge, and people have no idea. Like I feel like the zeitgeist, like nobody knows, but like underground slowly there's like millions and millions and millions of people that are super into just watching people play video games.
It's insane, and it's super interesting to talk to people. Like, I was talking to my parents because I was a speaker at DreamHack this year, and while I do not have a background in gaming, I do have a background in VR and AR technology, so I get invited to cool places like that. And I went there before my panel just to see all the excitement, and it's amazing. Like, I knew it was big. I've been to E-League tapings before at Turner, which were really fun. And it's such a huge industry, and there's so much revenue to be had there that the people who are jumping on now and sponsoring teams or starting their own competitions and tournaments are really raking it in. And it's just another facet of entertainment that's booming. I was talking to my parents about it, and I was trying to explain to them what it was, and they're like, people pay money to go see that, and they don't necessarily understand, sorry parents if you're listening, that it's just a new thing that's come out, but it's not that new, and people are monetizing it now, which is why it is all of a sudden booming. I have a friend who is a Twitch streamer, and he has like probably tens of thousands of Twitter followers, and because of it, and goes and speaks at all these different conferences and gets flown out to all these different events, and it's just like people want to watch him play. And my husband is a very avid gamer, and he'll sometimes watch videos just to see how he can improve his game. So I understand it from that perspective as well. But I mean, I'm more of a TV gal than a movie gal, and I watch shows that people think are stupid. And so I understand it from that perspective. It's like, no, but it's what I like, and it's how I get my joy and entertainment is by watching funny sitcoms or chick flicks and things like that. It's entertaining to me. And again, as I said earlier, this whole formerly, I guess, underground culture of people who are personalities on the internet are now being brought to the forefront because other people have found ways to monetize it. So I feel like they are in one way losing the kind of specialness and like underground feel of the whole thing, but in other ways they're now the cool kids. So they now get to be the popular ones, and it's kind of like a flip-flop on the traditional jocks versus nerds. Because I mean, even thinking back, and I only graduated high school about 10 years ago, but I was in marching band and like did all sorts of nerdy stuff, and that was kind of on the brink of becoming the cool thing to do. Or like, I was lucky enough to be on homecoming court as a band nerd, so like that was kind of starting to turn. But now, like, I talked to my niece, and she's like, oh yeah, there's robotics club at my middle school, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And I think that mentality is starting to change, or has changed, for the younger generation coming up, and they're the ones who are after the millennials, who are going to be pushing the millennial generation out, and we're going to say, darn you kids, and it's just a cycle that keeps happening and happening. So it's really interesting to watch.
It is insanely fascinating, because especially there's all these shifts that have happened in such small increments of time. Like I remember hearing, I went to this meeting the other day, it was for Meeting Planners International, and there was the head of sales for MGM, and he obviously like works a lot in their Las Vegas location and stuff, but they have lots of different stuff, and he was talking about esports and the different generations and why they're watching and all this kind of stuff. And they're actually building an esports arena in their Las Vegas MGM hotel casino, massive complex or whatever. And one thing he was talking about was there's like, we talk about the quote-unquote millennials, and there's almost like this divide where some of them got phones earlier than others based on like how far they're along. And the ones that got phones earlier are almost in their own little like sub group, because their behavior is drastically different than the older generation that got phones like after they graduated high school or whatever it might be. It's really fascinating. But the thing that I was going to mention is, you've got these, like you said, we've got these kids that are growing up now that are kind of pushing us out. It's weird because like when you think of like football or something like that, you've got it's very traditional. You're watching these people play. But to somebody who's never experienced football before, they're like, why are we watching all these people playing this dumb game on the TV? Like, why do millions of people want to watch these guys like hit each other and like run a ball across a line? And that's kind of how I think people need to look at video games in this fresh light. It's like, these games are crazy because you can do stuff that like no one can do in real life. It's more exciting than real life in some ways. And so when people are really good, like you said, your husband would like watch videos to see how he could get better or whatever. That's exactly like how people can look at it. Like I know League of Legends is like one of the biggest games that people watch for esports. And so like for me, I don't play League of Legends. So when I watch it, I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. But to someone who knows the game inside and out, it's like, it's amazing because you're like, holy crap, how did he just do that or whatever? And so I'm imagining in the future, like obviously they have these giant arenas where people go watch esports. I'm imagining in the future, like everyone's wearing like some sort of headset or glasses or something, and they would almost be like in the action. Like that would be so cool to me.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea, and I think that kind of also brings us into locomotion in VR. So we were talking earlier about how you could actually walk and it made it a better experience and you actually felt more comfortable and you didn't get sick because you actually had control of your own body. So that's something that people sometimes like forget about. So if we were to put you in the character, you would have to have something to ground you. Like if you're sitting in a little like bubble and you have a heads-up display and you understand that you're sitting and moving, then that would make sense to you because you sit in a car and move and you're fine. As long as you're in the front seat, sometimes I get car sick, but if I'm not driving, but you have something to ground you. And so I think it would be really cool to be able to be that player, but if you actually were the player and they were walking and you weren't walking and they make sudden stops, they make sudden turns and you're not in control of that, I feel like that could potentially cause some discomfort.
Yeah.
So we would really have to think about best practices and ways to make that a comfortable experience because so many people would love to be the character for like the number one player of Call of Duty in the world. Like how cool would that be? But then you have to think about how would you make a comfortable experience to where they actually enjoy it and are not going to throw up instantly.
Yeah, that makes sense. So maybe they're like you said, creating some sort of like pod, like viewing pod that they would like float around the environment in or something like that.
Yeah, it's a smoother experience so they're not like jarred by the sudden movements of the player.
Yeah, or I was even thinking like, because of League of Legends, it's like a lot of characters like walking around and fight, like hand to hand kind of like fighting kind of stuff. If you were just like a ghost, like you could just like walk around in the action or whatever, like that would be interesting, or like float around or whatever.
That
And you were controlling the viewing angles. That would be very interesting. Because I mean, like, I don't know, I'm just, for whatever reason, I'm imagining this like stadium of people and everyone's got like a headset on. I don't know why.
You wouldn't even have to be in the stadium. You could watch from home.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah, and of course you could watch from home, but I'm just like, there's something awesome about like everyone getting together to like be there. Obviously, everyone having a headset on would be like, I feel like people would bump heads and stuff like that.
They might. You just have to have the experience and knowledge to know how to set something like that up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the camaraderie of it all is cool too. And that's why traditional sports are such a huge thing, is because you're all pulling for a team together. So that translates over into esports. And when you learn the personal stories of the players and the teams, like it's so relatable to football or soccer or any of those other sports. And I think another thing that people who don't understand it, they think that all the games are the same, whereas every different game has a different storyline and a different objective. So watching, as you said, League of Legends versus Counter-Strike Go, which I know is what E-League here in Atlanta did or does, that's like watching two different TV shows or two different sports. Like it's the same overarching, I guess, type of activity, but it's a completely different story.
Totally.
That's so I don't think people understand that who are in it.
Yeah, it's like, I'm going to go watch sports. Oh, cool. What sport are you going to, I don't know, just sports.
Just sports.
all the sporty sports,
All the sporty sports.
The ones that are in the Olympics and
sports
stuff.
Ball.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's another thing I think people who aren't familiar with esports should know is that it is like saying, oh, I'm going to go watch sports. Well, are you going to watch basketball or are you going to watch hockey?
Yeah, exactly. Another thing that you mentioned that you guys do is like 360 video and stuff like that. And obviously that plays into VR because like viewing it, you kind of want to be in it. Obviously you can like flick around on your phone if it's on your phone or whatever, but it's not the same kind of experience. When you're filming that kind of stuff, like this is I'm really curious about 360 video because I really like making videos and stuff like that. And I think that 360 is like the future in certain ways, obviously, because it's more immersive and stuff. And there's different experiences that I've seen like on YouTube and stuff like that where creators are making these cool 360 experiences. What are, like, I guess the question I'm asking is, if people are trying to create those types of experiences, like what are the best practices they can use to make their 360 videos like the coolest or whatever? Because a lot of times you're worried about like being in the shot or whatever, stuff like that.
Yeah. So being in the shot's probably the one thing that people still struggle with. And it's really nice with 360 video that there still are professional level cameras and you can make up rigs with a bunch of GoPros, which is what we do, versus smaller cameras that are cheaper, like the Samsung Gear 360, which is great. We use that for like random things we go out and do in the community, or I brought it with me on my Eclipse trip, things like that, which are cool. Because I didn't want my lenses to burn out in my GoPros. I didn't really know, so I just brought that one just in case. Yes, you do have to worry about being in the shot, and there are two ways to approach that. One, run and hide, or two, integrate yourself into the shot. So depending on what you're filming, you can do that. If it's more of a personal thing, you probably want to be in the shot. If it's not, you can either stand outside of the focal point, or you can edit yourself out, but you have to film everything twice, and it has to be exactly perfectly the same. And then just take the one side of it and edit it out by replacing it. So that's a little more tricky. But the other thing that's really important is making sure, and I think we just talked about this, don't move people when they're not supposed to move. So a lot of people think, oh, this is great, I'll bring someone through a walkthrough of this house, or I'll take someone on a trip down the street and they just take the camera and walk with it. And that, while it might be okay if you're viewing it on your phone or a computer where you're not fully immersed, if you are viewing it in a headset, that is probably one of the most uncomfortable things you can do, because it's basically like you're taking a person, picking them up and moving them without them having any control. So what we like to do is have different shots and edit between them, but have interesting things happening around the camera. So you can still make a very engaging video when you're doing something like that. If it's a film where you're doing something in a car or a hot air balloon or things that are moving, as long as you do have a sense of grounding around you, then that's fine. So in a car, I would be sitting in a car and it would be moving and I would not. So you can do that. You can have we did one where, and this actually wasn't so bad, but we did one where the person did hold the camera, but they were going up and down a skateboard ramp. So the movement was actually very smooth. I still would not recommend anyone watching that one in a VR headset because they might get a little sick. But even if you're on a roller coaster, you are sitting and it is moving and that's supposed to happen. So in that case, that's fine. It's just taking a look at the user experience before you start filming is very important. And knowing if this is going to be publicized and spread out on social media through platforms that aren't in a headset, that's a different thing than people who are going to be viewing it in a headset. So keep both audiences in mind and then craft your experience for your audience.
That's really important that you like thinking, how are people going to consume this? Like earlier we were talking about my GoPro and how I was shooting it in portrait.
Oh yeah.
Because
that did not make Peter happy.
Because I've been trying to put more stuff on Instagram stories.
Yeah.
Because Instagram stories, it doesn't, no matter what you do, it doesn't let you rotate.
Right.
And if you're putting videos in people's feeds, you can only scroll Instagram vertically.
Well, and the same with Snapchat. Like everything's vertical video, and it's really interesting that advertising standards are starting to conform to that.
Yeah.
The IAB, which puts out their ad format standards every year, released their 2017 standards, I think a month or two ago, and they included vertical video, they included emojis, so there's now standards for using emojis in advertising.
Wow.
Yeah, international standards. They did VR, AR, and 360 video. So if you look those up, it's public, it's just a really long PDF about it. It's really fascinating to see that there are now internationally recognized advertising standards on those formats. And while it does annoy people like Peter and sometimes me, when you are specifically creating it for Instagram or Snapchat, like that's the standard.
Exactly.
So it makes sense there. And we'll let Peter be all grumbly upstairs while we're down here talking. But it's really fascinating to see things like that evolve as well.
Yeah, because obviously more and more videos being consumed on mobile phones. If you're creating for the platform, like Snapchat is like obviously so huge for vertical video and stuff like that. All the ads in between people's stories are in vertical, you know, and going back to like the generational gap, kids don't want to turn their phones. Like they want to just keep holding it and view content that way.
Right.
And so, yeah, you have to be definitely very intentional of like, okay, if I'm creating this like feature length movie, I'm not going to shoot it in portrait because people are going to be watching it on a different, they're going to be sitting down watching it in a different experience than flicking through their phone or whatever.
Yeah, and that comes back to knowing your audience. So I guess that conveys over all different types of media. But yeah, that makes sense with the feature filming and landscape, but I saw a vertical video as movie trailers now on Facebook when I'm scrolling through. And I don't know, maybe if the people listening to this are younger, they're like, who uses Facebook anymore? Well, I guess I'm old.
I definitely use Facebook. Facebook is, I feel like, I felt like for a while they were kind of going away and like they just came back stronger than ever.
Well, I think a lot of that may be attributed to the Messenger app because with a lot of my friends, especially if it's like a group chat, we'll use that over texting because you can see like read receipts, you can send all sorts of fun things. And with mobile phones, if everyone in your group has an iPhone, you can do that. But otherwise, you never know if things are coming across standardized. So I think that's one of the main reasons Messenger has really brought Facebook to a new light and kind of been a resurgence for them with the younger generation.
Definitely. Yeah, that's one thing that people get real hung up on is iMessage. They love iMessage, but like in Europe, they like don't trust it. They all use WhatsApp and stuff like that and Facebook Messenger. They're like, I don't want Apple knowing my messages and stuff like that.
Yeah, so you let Facebook know your messages.
Exactly. Yeah, Zuckerberg, he'll have them all. He knows everything about me anyway, so might as well let him know what everyone's talking about.
Yeah, and I think also with Facebook, a lot of people just have an account because so many other places have an automatic Facebook login. You don't have to remember a million passwords. You can just click login with Facebook and you may be giving away a bunch of your information. Sometimes they'll let you uncheck some of the boxes, but I try to only give away my public profile or my name. But it makes it so easy to integrate all these different platforms and different apps and things that I think that's been a huge factor for their usership.
Definitely. Another thing kind of going in Facebook, like they have all these groups where people are part of, and I know you are a part of a VR group. I don't know how active they are on Facebook and stuff like that. But how did that get started and like what do you guys do?
Yeah, we actually, it's funny you mentioned that because we actually took our Facebook page down recently because we didn't want to split members across platforms. But it's actually now called Virtual and Augmented Reality Atlanta. It was formerly the Atlanta Virtual Reality Meetup. It is still on meetup.com, so you can find it there, but we have about 950 members now, and the reason the name changed is because we recently merged with the Atlanta HoloLens meetup, and we had started to introduce other non-virtual reality content into our event, so it was a really good decision, I think, to merge with them so that we could create a bigger group that had more overarching interests, because so many of the people are the same that have interest in both technologies. But we actually started that group a little before we started the company, maybe a few weeks. That it was that quick of a turnaround. And we did that because we wanted to create an outlet for people in Atlanta who are interested in virtual reality technology. At the time, maybe didn't have access to the actual hardware, which has changed now, since you can, get your headset on Amazon Prime 2-day shipping. But we quickly grew. We had, I think, about 200 people show up to our first event at Battle and Brew, and have grown ever since. We have events about every other month, and possibly more often than that now that we've merged with the other group. We're having a more organized leadership team and really, splitting up the efforts to make it a bigger and better group in general. And it's been great. People have found jobs out of the group. It's a good networking opportunity. We've gotten work out of the group just from people who are interested in using it for their businesses coming to the events. And it's a good place to kind of bounce ideas off of each other, have a good sense of community, and really learn from each other.
That's awesome. At Battle and Brew, do they have VR stuff there, or is it only like console gaming there and board gaming and all that?
Yeah, as far as I know, they have not introduced virtual reality headsets yet, but they have every console you could ever imagine. Yeah. They also have rings of PCs, so you can sit around and play that, and then they have a good selection of board games. We play board games there a lot. My husband and our friends were really into board gaming.
Nice.
So it's kind of nice for me to get away from looking at a screen, yet still use my mind in a really fun way. So people are like, you work in virtual and augmented reality and you play board games, like real board games? I'm like, yes, I do. It's a really good outlet to where I can still use my mind, but not be looking at a screen.
That makes a lot of sense. The reason why I brought that up too is because I think people really love coming together and playing a multiplayer game. And sometimes in VR it's hard to like have that multiplayer experience. Obviously it gets kind of expensive having multiple headsets and all that kind of stuff. But do you how do you see multiplayer like going into gaming and stuff like that with VR?
Well, for people
without bumping into each other and all that.
For people who are already interested in doing that and trying it before they really make the investment, there are now virtual reality arcades popping up. So there are 2 open now in Atlanta that I know of. There's another coming soon. I'm not sure exactly when they're opening. But one is called iSimu VR, and one is called VRX Games, and both of those are in Gwinnett. So I have been to iSimu VR. I have not gotten a chance to make it out to the other one yet, but they have immersion bays, at least that's what I call them, where it's kind of like a cubicle, and they have 12 of them, and they all have an HTC Vive setup. They all have a really good menu interface with all different games you can play and a little timer in the corner, so you can rent it by the half hour, by the hour, by the day. And you can go there and play multiplayer games with your friends, yet still all be in the same place. I think...
So you're all in your own cubicle?
Yeah, you're all in your own cubicle, but you're all in the same room.
Very cool.
So you could probably shout across to each other, but everything has a microphone
that makes sense.
And headphones, so you can hear each other really easily. So I think probably if you're wanting to play multiplayer and be in the same physical space, that VR arcades are probably going to be the way to go for a long time. Because who's going to bring all their equipment over to people's houses? Like, whose house has that much room?
Exactly.
But the cool
thing... Because you have
thing,
your whole basement dedicated to VR or something.
And then you're just really intense. But with the multiplayer games in VR, I feel like people just boot in from their houses.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And have that experience similar to how you'd play on your Xbox and like play with your friends and still have a multiplayer game. So yeah, but if you want to try it now, like, it exists. It's here in town and you can do it today. So I think that's really cool.
Very cool. I didn't know the VR arcades existed. That makes sense, because I was going to ask you if people are wanting to, maybe they've tried like a little demo here and there or whatever, but if people are trying to get maybe not the most expensive setup or whatever for their own personal use, what headset would you recommend, and like what type of equipment would you recommend? Obviously, there's the highest end that we could go, getting the backpack and setting up an entire room dedicated to it. But if people are kind of like casually trying to get into it, what's like the best way?
I'm still gonna say the HTC Vive, but because if you're transitioning from mobile VR to PC-based VR, there's not a huge cost difference in getting like the Oculus Rift versus the HTC Vive. And the Oculus Rift is great, and I really like the comfort of the headset. But it is a smaller play space, which is why I would recommend the HTC Vive. You can also, have full access to Steam's library, which is great. Oculus has their own Oculus Home store. But yeah, I mean, the Vive is my favorite. You don't have to have the backpack, that is correct. If you already are into gaming and you have a gaming PC, likely you will be able to use it for VR. There are some websites where you can like run a specs test to make sure that your computer is up to snuff. But if a lot of gamers build their own, and all it would take is replacing the graphics card likely to be able to function at the level it needs to, which isn't crazy. And then the HTC Vive actually just went down in price. It was $800 and I think it's now $600.
Wow.
And that includes the lighthouses, which is what are in the corners, as well as the hand controllers. So that's the whole bundle. If you don't have a computer yet, there are what are called VR-ready PCs. So you don't have to spend the $1,700 or $2,000 that the backpack is. They have them for under $1,000. And I mean, heck, that's cheaper than buying a MacBook.
Yeah, seriously.
So if you're looking to do that.
And you can use it for normal stuff too.
Yeah, you can use it for your Instagram page. Although I think that's mostly, I was going to say Facebook, but I think you use Instagram mostly on your phone anyway.
Yeah.
You can't even post from computers.
But you can look at it, which is cool.
Yeah. But anyway, so while it's not necessarily cheap, you can get the VR headset in a full rig and all the accessories or everything you would ever need for probably $1,700.
That's not too terrible.
Yeah, I'm thinking phones nowadays are like $800.
I know. That's one thing that people don't get is like, you're paying for a super powered thing. It's like you should be super thankful that this doesn't cost like $10,000.
Yeah, and it used to. And you're basically paying for like a theme park in your house. So
that's
when you look at it that way, you can kind of justify the cost, but I do understand it's still expensive. And then as far as the setup is concerned, you don't have to have a dedicated room. It's nice if you do, but the boxes that are lighthouse in the corners, when we take them places, we put them on light poles. You can buy a set of those for like $25 on Amazon. If you want a temporary setup, you can just break them down whenever you're done. Or you can just do little wall mounts in your corners, and that's super easy, very unobtrusive. You probably won't even notice it when you're not using it. The only thing is if you are setting it up and breaking it down every time, you do have to remap the room every time. But that's not that difficult. It takes like 5 minutes to go through that whole process. So
gotcha. And the Vive, it's got all these like little sensors on the front of it, right?
Yes.
Is it like mapping? Is it just tracking what those lighthouses are giving it?
Yeah,
okay,
it's receiving information from. So the actual headset is plugged into the computer, and that is receiving infrared rays or infrared signal off of the lighthouse boxes. So the lighthouses actually aren't plugged into the computer at all. The only reason the computer knows where it is because you're mapping the room when you set it up. So
Gotcha.
The little divots, and they're in the controllers as well, those are just receiving the information.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's not, because I know, is the Oculus the one that like maps the room from the headset?
It does not. It does the exact same thing as the Vive, but flip-flop. So the cameras are on the outside and the infrared is coming off of the headset.
Gotcha.
So the cameras, I believe, also have to be plugged into the computer, which means you have to have more ports to plug them in. It's the Microsoft HoloLens that does the inside-out tracking.
Gotcha.
That's what we call it, inside-out tracking. And then the new Windows MR headsets by Acer and HP and Lenovo, those are the ones who are also doing the inside-out tracking. So it's not quite as precise as the Vive or the Rift because it is just trying to map the walls, but it is an excellent experience with less setup.
Gotcha.
So you could do that, and that is a lower cost option. But the problem with that is they just came out, so there's not much content yet.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
But there will be.
Yeah, like there's already tons of content for like the Steam library and stuff like that.
Steam.
That's really fascinating, because I remember that was the one complaint, like when all the Oculus was coming out at first, they're kind of like, yeah, there's like a handful of games, but now there's like tons and tons, which is really fascinating.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on our time pretty soon,
Yes.
but I wanted to ask you, like, is there anything that people that should know about VR that they don't already, like up and coming, like crazy stuff that's like gonna shatter the earth or anything like that?
Shatter the earth. But 2 weeks ago, I probably would have said Apple's AR release was going to be a big one, which it has since come out, and that's really exciting. I think I mentioned before, Magic Leap has kind of hinted that a select group of individuals will have access to their devices in about 6 months. If that happens, I will be jumping for joy, because I have been calling Magic Leap Magic Trick for a couple years now, because I in this instance am a see to believe person, which usually I'm not, but because it's just gone through so much stuff and they've kept things so secretive, I really want to see it before I believe it. But if that happens 6 months down the road, that could be phenomenal and also game changing. I hate saying game changing, scrap that. And you know what I mean? And I am excited about the new Windows releases with their MR headsets because of the inside-out tracking. I think the ease of setup of that device and the fact that there are no external sensors that need to be set up is huge, and hopefully that's the way of the future of this technology. It is an early version of it, but I think it does do some foreshadowing on what's to come. And I'm still waiting for my contacts that's just gonna put all this in my eyes.
Exactly.
It'll happen.
Yeah, I feel like there's gonna be something like the contacts or whatever that literally just put things onto your environment without having any weight on your face or anything. Like, obviously that'll be crazy, but I feel like there's something that's just gonna like shatter the landscape of this that we can't even like predict or whatever. Right.
And I think Magic Leap has the potential to be that, but I really have a difficult time saying that what they're doing is going to be successful, even though they have billions in funding. Like, it just, I've seen so many companies put out or raise funds for things that end up being vaporware, that while I want to believe it, I just can't say that it's happening until I see it. And usually I'm pretty good about predicting things and being open about saying things are coming, but with them, I will believe it when I see it, and that is where I'll leave it.
There we go. Well, if people are listening to this in the future and Magic Leap turns out to be the next big thing, you heard it here first.
Yes.
And if it's a giant flop, you also kind of heard it here first.
I know. I hate being indecisive. Like, that's one of the things I've been working really hard on over the past few years. But for this one particular instance, I'm going to say, I really don't know.
Yeah, and we won't know until it comes out.
Well,
but
no.
Very cool. If people want to follow you or follow Futurus or wherever, where should they go if they want to ask you questions or anything like that?
So social handles on Instagram and Twitter for Futurus is the Futurus. Pretty simple. And then for my personal Twitter and Instagram handles, it's Annie Arete, Arete. Means knowledge is power, which is cool. But sometimes people don't know how to spell it. I guess that's where you can find me. Please ask questions. I'm pretty active on Twitter, so that's probably the best place to contact me.
There we go. Very cool. Any last final piece of advice or knowledge or wisdom or sign off or anything?
Yes, my wisdom.
Final words.
Wisdom at the ripe age of 28. I would say, especially for people who are looking to get into the technology, it's not too early, even if everyone hasn't caught on yet. If you get in it now, you're going to be setting yourself up to be ahead of the curve, which is always great. There are a lot of online resources. We're big fans of lynda.com, Lynda, Lynda, and they have some really good online education for Unity and other creative or programming type platforms. So that's a good place to go for online resources for knowledge and learning. And even if you want to start your own thing, it is scary. You do have to take a lot of risks. They always say the highs are high and the lows are low, and that is an understatement. So I would say you have to have a strong personality to be able to take on something like that, but you can do it if you believe in yourself.
There we go. Very nice. Well, thanks so much for being on the show, and see you later, people.
Yes, thank you.
There we go. Another podcast in the books. Hope you guys enjoyed that one. I was really fascinated to talk with Annie and pick her brain about the future, and hopefully you guys learned something from our conversation. I certainly did, and I'm really happy I was able to connect with Annie and their team. And of course, virtual and augmented reality is all fun and games for, Snapchat filters and gaming and everything. But if you're a brand that wants to deliver a truly unique, breathtaking experience that your customers or employees will never forget, then you definitely need to talk to Annie and figure out how Futurus can help you meet those goals. You heard how much I was raving about the experience at the beginning of the podcast, and everyone in the future is going to experience what I experienced. They're going to have a very highly immersive VR experience at one time or another, one day. It's just going to happen. And you might as well be the one to provide that experience to them. It's going to be forever tied with your brand. And I'm never going to forget the first time I tried this. It's forever tied in my brain to Futurus. So, of course, the possibilities are endless. And I can't wait to see how Futurus and their technology continues to evolve and change the world. But again, if you are a brand that wants to connect with Futurus, you can go to their website. And I'll put all the necessary links in the podcast description here. But I want to thank Annie again for being on the show. If you're listening to this right now, I would assume that you enjoyed this episode. If you did, I think you would also probably really enjoy episode 43 with Sean Henry. And Sean is another young CEO and founder of a technology company. He's a little younger than Annie and I at the freaking age of 20 years old. But I think you would really get some value out of that episode as well. Sean is the CEO of a company called Stored, and we talked a lot about very similar stuff that me and Annie talked about. So if you enjoyed this episode, I really think that you would like this one. And I actually got to hang out with Sean twice this week. And once you hear what I have in store for episode 50, then I think you will know why. But not so fast. Don't leave yet. We got episode 49 coming up next. It's been highly anticipated and postponed, but the great Alan McNairn, I was supposed to have him on episode 47, but he just had a beautiful baby boy. They made the public announcement, so I think I'm allowed to talk about it here. But like I said, we decided to postpone the episode so we could do a little cross-promotion action. Alan was taking some time off because, of course, he has a new baby. But Alan is the owner and founder of Orange Identity, a company that's focused on helping brands find their identity. And we talked about all kinds of fun stuff. So if you're into business or creating an online presence and a cohesive brand, you will definitely want to check it out. And newsflash, you're a brand. So if you're on Instagram, if you're on Facebook, you are creating a personal brand. You definitely need to check this episode out because Alan gave some really valuable information about how you can solidify your personal brand as well. And since recording that episode, I've actually listened to it again, and I got so much value a second time. I've already implemented a lot of his ideas and strategies. I think you guys are going to love it too. That episode is coming in just a couple days, so stay tuned for that. If you want to support the podcast, the best way to do that is to go to iTunes or the Apple Podcasts app if you have an iPhone. Leave me a review in there. If you don't want to just leave a review and say like, oh, this podcast is good, I would be curious to know, go in the review section and leave me when and where you listen to the podcast. That really helps me out, because then I can figure out when I should release them, when, all that kind of fun stuff. I am a nerd about analytics and all that kind of weird stuff, and podcasts are not very highly analytics heavy. Like, it's hard for me to actually figure out who's listening to what and where. So go to iTunes and leave me a review, preferably a 5-star, because right now I have a 5-star rating, but the more reviews I have in there, the more people are going to be able to discover the podcast. iTunes happens to be the number one place to discover podcasts. So unfortunately, you just got to go rate it in there, but it takes like 2 seconds. Please go do that. Another way you can support the podcast, if you've already gone and rated it, is just simply sharing it with friends. People are sharing podcasts. The number one way that people find out about new podcasts is by word of mouth. So if your friends are talking about podcasts, I would really appreciate just dropping a, hey, listen to my friend Andrew's podcast. It's really cool. If you like blah, 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 you'll probably like episode blah, blah, blah. That is really, really helpful. And people trust their friends, right? So if you actually do enjoy the podcast, I would really, really, really appreciate you sharing it with your friends. But if you want to follow me, you can go to my website, andrewdeitsch.com. That's Andrew, DEITSCH.com. And you can find the links to all my social media handles and accounts there. But that's all I got, folks. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you guys have a fantastic week. See you later, everybody.